the hell have I been, huh? It's been a couple weeks now since my last video. So if you're not familiar with the Joe Rogan podcast, you should familiarize yourself with it. It's a good, it's probably one of the best podcasts on the internet. He has really good guests, really solid guests. He's had, Jordan Peterson a couple of times. But the most recent one I watched was Jordan Peterson with Professor Bret Weinstein. It's Weinstein. And if you're not familiar with Bret Weinstein, he's the professor at Evergreen College who, when the students announced they were going to have a day without whiteness, he pushed back and said, no, I'm not leaving campus. The politics you're engaged in are bad. They're dangerous. And if you want to discuss that, we can discuss it, but I'm not going to leave campus. And he took shit from the administration for basically escalating the situation. Because he wouldn't capitulate to these petulant children, he took shit. So yeah, he was on the Joe Rogan podcast. I think it's podcast 1006 with Jordan Peterson. And they discussed a lot of stuff. It's a long podcast. It's almost 3 hours. It's 2 hours and 40 odd minutes. So, but I strongly encourage everyone to watch it. It's really, really good. And they discuss, they go through the gamut. But basically, I guess the reason they wanted to, Bret Weinstein and Jordan Peterson, they hooked it up, was because I guess Weinstein wanted to address some statements that, or position that Jordan Peterson had given about Hitler and Nazis. And I guess he wanted to clarify his view and, I don't want to say debunk, but address some of the points that Peterson had made. Now, for a little bit of background, Bret Weinstein is an evolutionary biologist. So in this podcast, everything he talks about is from a very scientific point of view, from the point of view of the gene, right? I'm not going to get into the details of what they were talking about, in particular with regards to Hitler, Nazism, and the rise of fascism in Europe under Hitler. I'll leave you to watch all that, but near the end of the podcast, they started to address something that had occurred more recently, the Charlottesville fiasco, and the blowback and fallout of surrounding Trump's statements after and during the incident. And I want to address some of the things that both Peterson and Weinstein said, because as much as I respect Peterson, as much as I respect Weinstein after only seeing him speak on this podcast, I had to take issue with some of the things they said with regards to Trump. Now, Weinstein said, look at me defending Trump, who'd have thunk it? Anyway, Weinstein said that Trump's statements following Charlottesville, in which he called out violence and bad behavior on many sides, was cynical, and he basically accused him of dog whistling to the white supremacists and neo-Nazis and KKK, who he, again, as is common in the media and as is common in intellectual debate and political debate, are part of his base, so to speak, right? Which impugns the motives of not only Trump, but of his supporters. And Joe Rogan made a funny statement, which I thought was kind of clever. Not every Trump supporter is a racist, but every racist is a Trump supporter. Which is, hyperbolic, and of course it's not meant to be literally true. Just as it's not meant to be literally true when you say not every Muslim is a terrorist, but every terrorist is a Muslim, right? Of course, not every terrorist is a Muslim. But the wisdom in that statement is that, by and large, you can make a generality that if there's a terrorist act going on somewhere in Europe or in the world, you can almost guarantee that it's a Muslim who's doing it. And I guess to Joe Rogan's point, if somebody's spouting racist sentiments online, it's almost guaranteed that they voted or they supported Trump in the last election. Maybe. I don't know. I mean, their candidates were pretty limited, right? My criticism of that is it doesn't add anything and it doesn't help anything. And throughout this entire podcast, Peterson and Weinstein were talking about, the dangers of this kind of thinking, of this sort of this tribal tendency of people, and the concern of where it can lead, right? And then this is a very casual setting, but they're engaging in the same sort of tribalism. Now, here's what Weinstein said that really bothered me. He said that, and I mentioned it, he said that, Trump's failure to call out the KKK and the neo-Nazis specifically was a wink and a nod to them saying, hey, I'm still your guy. And this really bothers me, and I hear this a lot from people, and I think it's a poor habit to get into, where you infer motive and you infer intent on people based upon your own prejudices. I mean, that's the epitome and a definition of being a racist or being prejudiced towards somebody. But it's just for people like Weinstein and people on the left. And Weinstein is, clearly on the left. He even admitted as such in the podcast. It's a foregone conclusion. They've established this fact in their head that Trump is sending signals to racists, and he's dog whistling racists, and that's how he got so much support in 2016 election. And again, this is not it's incorrect to do so. You shouldn't infer motive or infer intention on people if they haven't explicitly, or you haven't verified what they were implying. To do so is bad. It's intellectually dishonest. And the problem with Weinstein's assertion and others in media and academia is that they haven't confirmed what was implied. And I want to talk about the difference between implying and inferring, right? So, someone makes a vague statement, and as we all know, Trump is very imprecise in his language. He's a clumsy speaker. But I'll get to more of that in a minute. But somebody makes a vague statement. The correct response is not to immediately infer what they mean, what you think they mean, because when you do that, you're projecting your own prejudices, you're projecting your own deeper subconscious psychoses on that person, because heaven forbid you ever admit you have your own prejudices and your own psychoses. No. Those are for your enemy. Those are for your ideological opponent. You have to infer those on those people. And that's why I'm saying to do that is not only dangerous, but it's intellectually lazy. No. When somebody says something that's vague or isn't altogether clear in what it is the point they're trying to get across, the correct response is to say, what are you implying? Or to ask, are you implying this? To immediately infer it, and to infer it, weeks after the fact, or to infer it when that person isn't present, it's dirty pool when it comes to ideological discussion and ideological debate. And that's so much of what politics is, though. So But Peterson was bad as well, because he said, yes, it was, given the climate and given what had just happened, it was incorrect for Donald Trump to have made that statement and then later come out and condemned, you know, the white nationalists and the white supremacists and all that. And I'd have to ask Peterson, as much as he decries communism and the left and neo-Marxism and postmodernism, if he's speaking about Trump's statements only in the context of the particular climate at that time, I can understand that. But if he's saying that, you know, for whatever reason, Nazis as a special group need to be decried more than communists, need to be decried more than anti-fascists, need to be decried more than neo-Marxists and postmodernists, then he's basically contradicting, you know, every statement he's ever made on the subject over the last 6 months to a year. So I have to assume that what Peterson was talking about was specifically in regards to the context, because of the collision that had happened where somebody lost their life at the hands of a neo-Nazi. But I also think Peterson's wrong. I think that the best thing was for Trump to say what he did when he said it. And here's why. If Trump had come out and said, you know, I decry the violence at the hands of the alt-right and the neo-Nazis and the white supremacists and the KKK, they're all terrible people and that ideology has no place in America. If he'd said that as his first statement, one, the media never would have cottoned on to the idea of actually discussing the violence regarding Antifa, the other side, the many sides. Two, the people on the right would have accused Trump of not addressing Antifa and the violence perpetrated by them. So by him saying many sides on his very first statement, he actually did a favor to the conversation. As clumsy as he was, as inarticulate as he was, as imprecise as he was, he moved that conversation. And this is, I mean, I want to say that Trump is a master manipulator of the media, and I think he's mostly lucky. He does understand the media, he does understand celebrity, he does understand how the media works, but I think a lot of times, lately anyway, he gets lucky. I think his intentions and his intuitions are right, because the fact is, that conversation needed to be had, and it wouldn't have been had if he'd simply just gone along with the media narrative that, you know, the neo-Nazis are the only bad actors in this situation. The Antifa are actually the good people, the counter-protesters, right? So, by one, not naming anybody specifically in his first statements, and two, calling out the violence on both sides, he moved the conversation in the direction it needed to be. Anyway, that's all I got to say on the matter. Thanks for watching, and I strongly encourage you, you know, instead of wasting time on Netflix or on watching garbage TV, watch the Joe Rogan podcast, 1006, between Joe Rogan, Jordan Peterson, and Bret Weinstein. You're doing yourself a favor, and if you like what I do here, then like and subscribe. Thanks very much. Talk to you later.